Hello and welcome to the Hawks Nest live stream show. We've got ourselves a very special guest back in the house, making another return here. Love having him on, and you absolutely have to have him on once you get through the end of the draft coverage. This man dives into it with his partner out there at Bootleg Football, and I'm speaking, of course, the man, myth, the legend, EJ Snyder in the house. It's good to have you back in here, my man. Thank you for doing this show. And like I said, I had to do it. I had to bring you back in here because I know you get as deep into this, you guys do, as anybody in this game.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. It's good to get the seat after the draft. And yeah, it's even more fun when your team did pretty darn well. It's nice to rehash victories instead of losses.
Boy, is it ever. And we've got a good amount to cover today, a little bit end to end. We're going to definitely look at the Seahawks draft and some of the players that were picked out of there. But I always like to start a little bit from a standpoint of big picture and you looking down a little bit on this draft because every year is different. It's part of what makes this draft so fun is that you just don't carbon copy them year to year. There's always some kind of different stuff to it. Anything you kind of noticed from that this year as far as anything that stood out to you, or maybe there wasn't on that side of as far as trends or something new about this kind of draft this year?
You're right about it being endlessly fascinating, Brandon. That's one of the things about the draft that's so cool is each class is a snapshot. They're all different, and you can definitely make generalizations from trends and numbers and everything else, but each one is its own deal, and you have to look at it in terms of strengths and weaknesses. And this draft was not particularly strong on blue chip players, but it was strong through the wide middle of the draft, what we call meat and potatoes, people rebuilding their rosters, people rebuilding trenches. Running back was incredibly strong in this draft, and teams have to adapt for that, both in how they approach free agency that year and then what they can pull out of the draft, future planning or future proofing their rosters. And we did see that there was a little bit of a scramble at the top of the first round to try and trade up to get those blue chip players, or a bunch of teams that had deals in place that didn't come to fruition because they couldn't get a hold of them. And really, strangely enough, after the Bears pick, after Colson Loveland went off the board, there was a cooling. Nobody traded again until the 25th or 26th pick. And that was a quarterback coming off the board. That was the Giants coming up for a quarterback. And you can, debate the wisdom of that, but there was this long stretch in the middle where everybody went, okay. Like now we're just down to picking players based on our board because the guys we really thought about giving assets up to go get are off the board. We're going to stay true to our board. And again, the boards are all different. And we saw that through the middle rounds. There were definitely receivers picked earlier or much later than you thought they would be based on your evaluation because the team thought very highly or not as highly of those guys. And that was up to a couple of rounds worth of variance this year, which is wider than normal. And, we'd predicted that, and it did come to pass. And then there's always just the wild hair selections. There's just I'm not sure what they're doing there, but they chose to spend a 4th round pick on that. Okay, moving on. So it was a lot of fun. I think it maintained a ton of interest. You could say what you want about the Shedeur situation, but if you look at the viewership numbers, they were way up. Our viewership numbers were way up. We had well over 4,500 people, well down into the 6th round on the live stream, which is bananas. It's interest in the draft growing year over year, but this was a compelling draft because it wasn't, like you said, chalk. You couldn't map out the first 15 picks and say, yeah, after that, it gets interesting. It really got interesting after the 3rd or 4th pick and stayed that way for a long time.
Boy, it did. And you mentioned Colston, where I was reading some of the reports too. It seemed like half the sport was trying to move up into that spot to go get him. And that's, of course, coming ahead of Tyler Warren, who everybody had as the consensus guy walking in as a top 10 guy. What do you make of the reasoning why that sort of vaulted one to the other on those two there?
Well, when you say consensus, it's interesting because I don't know what there was. There were consensus that those were the top 2 guys, and they were in the same tier for me, but they're very, very different players. A lot of people, because they quote unquote play the same position, just said, hey, it's 1 and 2 or 1A and 1B. They're very different players. Like if you're drafting a Colson Loveland, you're not going to get the same things out of him that you are a Warren, and vice versa. Like Colson Loveland is a better, more polished route runner. I think of him as basically a huge power slot receiver because that's his skill set. He can run, he can catch the ball away from his frame. He's very good at finding space. When JJ McCarthy was still there, he got down the field a lot more, and he was still getting open down the field this year. But again, the changing quarterback really had a regression from Michigan in the passing game. So you didn't see as much of that, but Colson was still demonstrating all those skills. Tyler Warren lines up all over the field. He's an incredibly hard-nosed football player. He played fullback for them, wildcat quarterback, lined up out wide, lined up in the slot, lined up even as a center and caught a pass for a touchdown. So he's a much more versatile player in that way, but he is not the pure downfield threat that Colston Loveland is. So it really depended on what you want. And Ben Johnson looked at that and said, hey, I know exactly how I'm going to use this guy in Colston Loveland, and chose him as, again, the first draft pick of his, administration as head coach. And that's always a thing. The first draft pick you make as a head coach or GM is always kind of looked back on as a tone setter. And I think he got exactly what he wanted in Colston Loveland, in a young guy, 21 years old, not even done growing yet, who can really be a weapon in the passing game.
Was that your pick for the Bears at that spot? Was that your favorite guy?
The way that it came down, yes. And again, we talk about each draft being different and a million different scenarios get thrown around. But once you're on the clock and the board breaks the way it does, there were 3 tackles taken in the first 9 picks, which was, it seemed like people came around to that in the last week. But if you'd said a month before the draft that 3 tackles were going to be off the board by 9, I think people would have looked at you like you had horns coming out of your head.
Yeah.
It tends to happen that way. It's one of those positions where it does creep up and everybody goes, well, if we don't get one, we're not gonna. So people take them early. Ashton Genty was off the board. The Bears were trying to trade up to get Ashton Genty. They had deals in place, but it depended on him falling and, the player that the other team wanted being on the board. That didn't materialize. He goes off the board. They're stuck with, the 4th best offensive tackle if they want to do that. Of course, they went Trapillo later on. They still had that as a need. But in terms of where their board fell, I think Colston Loveland was the best out for them. And my sticky note for the 10th spot was get a good football player. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, but it's not. It was a very tricky spot to be in because a lot of the guys you wanted were going to be gone. And then all the grades really did even out. And Colston Loveland was one of the few remaining players at that point that did have a grade higher above those guys that was going to be useful in your program. So I think they did the best they could given the situation. It's not a backhanded compliment. It's a job well done. You could have done a lot worse. And when we look back in 2 or 3 years and we do redrafts on this draft, I think a lot of people are going to say, oh, there's a lot of people that didn't manage to get that done.
Yeah, and interesting enough, if Carroll's probably not the head coach down there in the Raiders, Genty's probably a Bear today.
Probably so.
If that worked that way. Who did you have in general terms of in this draft as the winners and losers of this draft? As the teams that came out of this, they just really impressed you by what they did, and the other ones on the other side, they went, oof.
Yeah, not that many losers, which is kind of cool. Nobody spent a 2nd round pick on a kicker. Nobody did the sort of indefensible things. There are definitely stronger drafts and weaker drafts, but in general, I liked most of the teams' drafts. There were certainly, that being said, there were certainly teams that I was like, man, top to bottom, they really stack it. I think the Eagles, Patriots, the Chiefs, the Hawks were one of mine. We've got our pot on bootleg coming out on our favorite drafts. Hawks are on my list. I think depending on what you think about how they attacked quarterback, given how they are, the Giants could be on there. They had a very strong draft. And, there's more teams I think you could say, man, they had a really good draft. But there are just a few, 5, 6, 7 teams at the top where you look down almost every pick and you're like, man, I can see the fit. I can see the value. There are multiple times on the live stream I exclaimed when Philly selected, and I was like, of course, come on.
They do.
And I know it's getting to be a trope that like Howie did it again, but Howie keeps doing it again. That's the reason it's a trope. So multiple teams I thought had really good drafts. Nobody had an abysmal draft. Usually there's 1 or 2 kind of stinkers where you're just like, oh, come on. There's teams I could argue, hey, I would have done other things at other places, but I still didn't come away from their draft thinking like, hey, you just booted the whole thing.
I had a general opinion of this too. And so it seems that you're in lockstep with this, and it was almost annoyingly so as you're sitting there waiting for your team to pick in this draft of like, why is everybody doing things so smartly?
Yeah.
Why is everybody being so damn smart at every turn here around 1, 2, or 3? And like I said, there was outlier picks there always, but you feel like you come out of these drafts a lot more being able to throw a lot more shade at certain organizations going, what the hell were you doing in this draft?
Right.
Well, what was your take? I guess you kind of threw it out there in the lead on if you like the Seahawks draft. You're feeling it's one of the better ones. And I guess, and I'd love to get a breakdown of some of these players. You don't have to go individually by individually, some of the ones that stood out to you. But I'd also like to kind of wonder too on it from your standpoint with liking the draft, the Hawks, is it the value in how they drafted, Or is this because there's always a bit of that line when you have a team picking 5 times, top 100, are you giving them the credit for, the picks they're making, or that they had a lot of picks, and what they made?
It's a great point that you bring up in terms of how you're grading a draft, because there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's some people that say, hey, if you knock the top 3 picks out of the park, the rest of it doesn't matter. That's one way to grade it. The other is, hey, you continued to get value throughout the board as it fell, and it fell to you. And again, each draft being a little different, it's really handy when the draft board lines up with your team needs. It does not always happen. We see lots of teams that it doesn't happen for. You need a quarterback this year, a starting quarterback. You're kind of out of luck if you're not way up at the top, like number 1. Or you need a pass protecting left tackle, and you're picking 20 or 25. Well, good luck. It's probably not going to happen for you. So I think the Seahawks had a great combination of nailing the top draft picks in terms of priority needs. Every team has lots of needs, but look, we know the Seahawks struggled desperately with interior offensive line last year and in years past. And I didn't think they'd take Zable up at the top. They did. And I was very surprised by that, pleasantly so, but surprised that people had asked me the week before the draft, what do you think the Hawks are going to do? And I said, well, if it was me, I would take Zable, but I'm not sure he's going to be there. And B, I'm not sure John would do it because he hasn't in the past. And both things happened. He was there and John did it. And that was a surprisingly solid move to start off their draft. And I don't think they really sort of fell off that value and pick pace for the rest of the draft. You can argue about some of the really lower picks, but again, as I go down, Zable in the first round, Nick Emanwari gives Mike Mack his Kyle Hamilton clone, right? He's not necessarily going to come on in the first year, but I think he is going to play in the first year in certain spots. And by year 2, I think we could see a very similar rise to Kyle Hamilton. Again, he didn't play very well in his first year. He played great in his next year and the year after. Elijah Arroyo gives them a weapon at tight end that I don't really feel like they had. The question about him was never ability. He is, I think, again, on Colston Loveland's level as one of the best receiving tight ends in this draft. And he's got good size. The question always with him was his knees. And I think the Hawks obviously are pretty comfortable with his knees where they took him. Then you get to Jalen Milroe, who's one of the most fascinating players in this entire draft. I think the biggest lottery ticket that you can get, because the bottom line is if you select a quarterback anywhere up top in the first round or even later down, like they did with Milroe, and you turn him into a weapon, right? He develops the way you think he could to be a weapon, to be a top 10-ish talent at quarterback in the league. You won the draft. I don't care about the rest of the picks. And Jalen Milroe doesn't have to play this year, which is probably the biggest thing I had in his evaluation, right? This is an incredibly talented kid, a very hard worker, an A-plus person by everybody that I've talked to that interacted with him directly, who has unreal rushing talent, one of the best rushing threats in this draft. And I don't mean at quarterback. I mean pure one of the best rushing threats in this draft, and can throw it. A lot of people are talking about it like he learned how to throw football yesterday. When everything comes together for him, you see it. You see the flashes and you say, oh, man. Problem is it doesn't come together all the time. He has inconsistency in his mechanics, particularly in his base, and he'll just go to stretches where he doesn't hit the easy stuff. And you need to do that in the NFL to keep drives going. But you'll see him thread the ball into the second and third level in what I would call, pro-sized windows or pro-sized holes. He has a great arm. Like, he does not have a bad arm at all. And he just needs to put it together. He needed to go to a place where he could sit, work on his mechanics, get consistent, and not have to be thrown into the fire as a starter. That's exactly what Seattle is. They've got Sam Darnold for 2 years, and right about the time all the guaranteed money on Sam's deal is expiring, they're going to know. They're going to have had Jalen Milroe in practice and on the field for a couple of years, and they're going to get it as to, hey, this worked out, or, hey, he hasn't made the progress we wanted him to. But either way, he's a great guy to have in your building. And if you hit on that lottery pick, there's no greater payoff in the entire draft than doing that. And then the rest of the board, it hits needs. And I think they got some real gems in there. Bryce Cavill is a guy that, again, if people are like, oh, all the picks should be offensive line. Well, I don't know about that. But if you pick 2 good ones, I'm fine with it. Right. And they did. Zable, I already talked about. I think he's going to be fantastic and start for them for 7 or 8 years without question. And then Bryce Cavill is a sneaky one down the board. That Kansas offensive line was very good. I watched his tackle Logan Brown quite a bit. I watched his running back Devin Neal. So you're seeing the holes that get opened in front of him. And Brandon Thorne, who's one of my favorite on offensive line analysis, I reached out to him about a week before the draft and said, "Hey, do you have any down the board guys you really like that you think you're higher on than consensus?" And Bryce was one of the 3 guys he named. And so when he went off the board to the Hawks, I was like, "Oh, interesting. Okay." They get more interior offensive line reinforcement. Damian Martinez is just a dollar that other teams dropped because of off the field stuff. It's more maturity than real character. Like, he made a bunch of mistakes as a younger player. They're not terrible. They're not illegal. It's just, hey, that was kind of boneheaded. That's why he ended up transferring to Miami. But as a player on the field, he's far greater than a 7th round talent. Like, he was my 9th rated running back in this very deep running back class. So very good player, dropped because of nothing between the white lines off the field. They're hoping that, they get him in the building, can deal with those issues. And, he's matured. He's an older player now. So we'll see if that works out. And then, they go for Oots. And I was like, oh, there's their first misstep. And then they say, oh, they're going to play him at fullback. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. If you're going to play him as an inline tight end, I don't like the choice of Robbie Oots. If you're going to play him at fullback, okay, that lines up. I can see it. And then Mason Richmond in the 7th round is a depth, practice squad guy they hope develops. But if you just go top to bottom, and I didn't even talk about Torrey Horton, who honestly is one of my favorite picks in the entire draft. I love Torrey Horton. Loved him a couple of years ago and then kind of forgot about him because he went back to school. So I'd started some early work on him and they decided to go back. And then, I was maybe 15, 20 receivers deep in this year's draft. And I got down, I was like, oh, I watched like 2 games. I was like, oh, I love him all over again. This is great. Very productive receiver, 2,000+ yard receiving seasons in his last 2 fully healthy seasons. 6'4", runs great routes, can catch the ball anywhere. Really, really good hands. Nice little yak ability with a sort of quick turn after the catch. Some good speed on crossing routes. I was a high school quarterback, so he sees the game in a very different way. He sees it from the quarterback perspective. He understands what that guy needs him to do out there. Some special teams return ability. Like, I really think Torrey Horton was probably underrated in this draft and was super happy to see him come to Seattle. So again, you start looking at that and you stack all those names I just talked about and you go, wow, they got value from the top to the bottom. They filled a lot of needs. People might say, oh, I wanted this, or I wanted an X receiver sooner, or I wanted more guys at the interior offensive line or whatever. But when you look at the quality and the value, it's a very, very good draft class. John was on a heater. He made it happen.
When it comes to Zable, we've had a couple of recent guys come out of Dakota that have been good NFL player or good prospects. Let's just call it that. And I know you've looked at each of the recent 2 that have come out. I want to reference to. So where does Zable stack up on the pecking order of your evaluation? Zable, Dylan Radins, and Cody Mock.
So Mock was more of a guard for me and a good one. He was always going to be a good one. And he was power based, but he could really move. And you always want to see that. Is, again, I think you're required by law to show folks wrestling highlights if they played offensive line.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think if they were wrestlers and they get to play in the NFL that you can't bring those highlights up during the draft. I think it's illegal. I think you'd be jailed if you don't. So
especially a Dakota player.
Yeah,
from Dakota too, right?
Anybody from the Northern Midwest, like it's required viewing. So, that background for Cody as well, but a real power player and sort of real brawler at guard, but had mobility to go with it. And that's what people got excited about. And that's what he showed in the league. So he'd be up there with Zable. Dylan Radins was more of a tackle, more angular, taller on the outside, hasn't hit in the way that I thought he would. But again, there's always a projection about, is he going to develop? He needs to do this, this, and this as an NFL player. And that's for every college player. Radins hasn't really ascended those heights, had a more checkered career in the NFL. He's still in the NFL, which is, that's a credit to him, but didn't hit as hard. Zable is, played all these snaps at tackle. He played 2,700, almost 2,800 snaps at tackle in college. So a very experienced player, great mobility. But again, as you start to go up against the pros, as you start to go up against the werewolves that exist on defensive lines in the NFL, if you don't have arm length, you're going to get moved inside. Zable does not. And I'm fine with that because he plays with a nasty streak. He plays with a lot of toughness on the inside. He is very mobile. Again, he's able to operate in space. It wasn't his feet or his angles in terms of how he approached things at NDSU. It's that he's got shorter arms. He's a very smart player. I watched him snap at the combine. I watched him for like 5 minutes at the combine, and I was like, done, fine, stamped. He just looked different than everybody else in terms of the smoothness, the way he moves, the quickness, the power. He's got real snap coming off the ball. I think he's going to be a high level starter. I don't just mean a guy you can plug in and kind of forget about. I mean, he's probably going to be a guy very soon competing for Pro Bowls and maybe eventually all pros. We'll see. That's high praise, but like, I think he could work his way into a Pro Bowl berth in the first couple of years. And that wouldn't be a stretch because he is smooth, polished, experienced, plays with an edge that offensive line coaches are going to love. I really, really like Gray Zable.
Center or guard?
For me, I would put him at center because he's smart and because it sort of plugs a hole that they've had for 3 years, which is, trust me, an issue that is near and dear to my heart as a Bears fan. If you do not have a center, you're in big trouble on your offensive line. And if you get a guy that can play center, is composed enough, is smooth enough, is intelligent enough, and really quick enough, because a lot of modern run games, especially what they want to do in the system now with their new OC in Seattle, you're going to pull the center on a bunch of those zone runs. And Zable, I have no problem pulling Zable. Like, he is a good player on pulls.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's what I've been predicting as well. And everybody's been, no, he's going to guard. And I'm like, they'll try him a guard. They'll try him a guard, but I think he probably ends up eventually at center when it's all said and done.
And I don't have issue with him at guard either, to be sure. It's a lot of guys that the tackle transition when they're coming inside, if they have good feet, a lot of people are like, well, yeah, but you're lining up against 320-pound guys that are trying to eat your lunch. Do you have enough power? Do you have enough grit? Do you have enough torque? Do you have enough hand strength? Zable's got those things. Like, he demonstrated those at tackle. If you watch him finish some of his blocks at tackle at NDSU, you have no concerns about him playing a guard. He's going to bury some guys there too. But a center I see as guard plus, right? It's extra.
Yeah.
You've got extra responsibilities. You got to have extra vision. In most systems, you have to call the protections. So there's I tend to think offensive line, in my experience, offensive linemen are the smartest guys on the team when you talk to them. But you need to be like smart plus to play center. And I think Zable fits that. I think he's got all the physical requirements. So it's kind of like the guard tackle thing. If a guy can play tackle, I think he's more valuable typically. So he's a tackle until he's not, and then you could kick him inside. If he's already inside, which I think Zable is, if he's a center first, and then he's a guard, but it might not line up that way in Seattle's vision on the roster immediately. But I think he'll end up as a center in this league.
Cool. Well, I definitely, and I can see that. I don't have a problem with that either. I think he will be good in that place, just different from where he's at on that. With Arroyo, I love to hear your thoughts that you're as hyped up as in. Many of our fan base is super hyped up on him. I've struggled a little bit with this one myself, and part of my wonder with this a little bit is trying to understand a track record of, do we have any recent real college tight ends that have dealt with as many injuries as he's dealt with? Who, I mean, even his last year where he said essentially had his kind of breakout year, he still has through half the year he's injured. And I go, I don't know if I've got any NFL comps of a guy who's had that in college, no matter what the talent level is, who then comes on and the injury level gets better now. It's almost like I have more guys like Luke Musgrave going to the Packers a couple of years ago as far as examples. And I just always look for the historical markers to get that kind of encouragement and optimism.
Yeah, it's tremendously difficult with medical stuff because we never see it. And even if we did, we're not doctors. So we don't know. Like, we can't say, well, in our 20-year experience of arthroscopic knee surgery, we've never seen it. Like, we don't know. Like, you could show us the MRIs and we'd be like, I don't know what that means. So it really is taking their word for it. And, these issues are known. They're not issues that cropped up at the combine or anything else. Like, this was the book on Arroyo coming in. So everybody was going to look at it twice as hard because everybody knew it was there. And some teams, again, are going to be very comfortable with that diagnosis and his ability to play through it, play with it, heal from it, whatever it is. And some teams are not. Some teams are going to say, in our experience, it doesn't work out that way. Or, we're going to ask them to block a lot more, and that's a lot more torque on those joints. And we don't love it. We prioritize second contracts more, whatever it is, right? Everybody's got their comfort level, and we can just sort of sit here and throw darts at it. We know it's an issue. We know that's what the issue is. We don't know what that really means, what it looks like, or where their comfort level comes from, but they knew about it. They certainly looked at it. This is not something they're going to be surprised by, post draft. That does happen occasionally. A guy will come in and, despite all the medical checks, which are many and varied, they'll come in and, blank player has an irregular heartbeat that we found during OTAs or something. Like, this isn't that. Everybody knew full well going in, shined a bright light on it. And the Seahawks said, hey, we're okay with it. It balances out. And it does come from, that talent, right? If you look at the Cam Ward highlights at Miami, a lot of his productions to Elijah Arroyo. There's a ton to Restrepo as well, some to Sam Brown, but he made hay with Elijah Arroyo. And that was a great combination for the two of them. Certainly got Elijah Arroyo drafted higher. As you said, this was a breakout year for him production wise that really shined the spotlight on his talent. And he is more of a down the field tight end than a lot of tight ends. He can work the underneath area. He's very big, but he's very fluid. He runs routes very well, and he does work to the second and third levels, which not a lot of tight ends do. And he does it very, very well. So it's an exciting addition for the Hawks. They haven't really had that tight end. Noah Fant brings them some of that, but I would say not with the same size, with more speed. And maybe even a more limited route tree. Like, I always wanted Noah Fant to do more than he did. He's very good at what he does, but it's a kind of a
You and all
narrow
the Seahawks
envelope.
fans.
Right. It's kind of a narrow envelope. Again, he's not a bad player, but he is a
No.
very specific player. I think Elijah Arroyo sort of widens that ability for what you can do with the spot.
You buy Elijah as the coaching staff has intimated that he'll be able to play the X?
They line him up there, and if you can get off press in the NFL, you can play X, right? Because that's the difference. Is a lot of times in college, they're not going to press you. Press is much more rare in college than it is in the NFL. And you're going to have to be able to get off press out there. And I don't care how you do it. You could do it with your feet. You could do it with fakes. You can do it with size and just bull through it. Like, you have to be able to beat it. And if he can demonstrate that he can beat press on the outside, yeah, he can play X.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's definitely, I'm hopeful with it, because they're talking about using him in that way just widely. And I want to get on the plan, but then I hope it is. Just like I said to you on this, though, that I try to look at the historical markers on this, and I just can't quite find anybody that's kind of had that struggle at college injury wise at this position, especially that came to the pros and it all clicked into place. I might be forgetting on somebody, but it's just the one place I've got a little bit of worry there.
That's the question. And it's the big coin flip, right? Because injuries are so hard to deal with. Like, way back when my team drafted Kevin White was uninjured in college. He had as clean a college medical folder as there was. A couple nicks, but nothing serious, right? Looks okay. Looks like he's starting to figure out as a rookie, has a terrible injury, never recovered. And everybody said, oh, he's a bust. Well, he's not really a bust. You drafted a clean, physically dominant college player. He had a terrible injury. He didn't come back. It happens. Like, it's unfortunate, but there was no indication like, hey, this is a thing. We're really worried about this. And it happens. And then you see the flip side. You see guys like Frank Gore and Nick Chubb who come in with terrible injuries on their record and play for, 10, 12, 15 years at a high level. And, one would have said, no, don't do that. And the other would have said, yeah, you're fine. And it turned out the other way. So injuries are kind of like interceptions and sacks. They're very fickle.
So interesting you say Chubb, because that's, of course, the exact same thing with the Rashad Penny thing. Was Rashad Penny had one of the cleanest medical evaluations, according to John, that they had ever had coming out of San Diego State, and yet the debate was between him and Chubb. Carroll wanted Chubb. They wanted to go with Rashad because of the clean, Chubb with the medical. And so it just goes to prove, sometimes it is just a pure crapshoot. Yeah. When it comes to Jalen Milroe, the team is saying that they're going to maybe potentially look, as long as everything's good with him, even this first year. You mentioned sitting. The plan doesn't seem to be to sit him in the first year. What they're going to attempt to do, if it goes well and he looks okay, is to try to trot him out there 10% of the snaps. I've had a rich history of watching the dual quarterback thing. Like, we're going to trot this guy off the bench. We're going to trot that guy out there. Okay, this guy's going to come. Okay, now that guy's going to come out there. College pros. I've seen it for many decades. It doesn't have a very rich history of working. Can you sell me on that? The 10% switcheroo thing?
Well, it's tough. You have to have a tremendous talent to do it, right? You have to have enough talent from the guy coming on the field to offset all the negatives. And the negatives are, there's different cadence, different snap count, different feel, guys move differently in the pocket, which means the offensive line has to block differently. They get very used to the guy behind them in terms of, does he fade from the pocket? Should I shade this block to the left or the right? Because again, they just know that from feel, from tape, from all the reps. Then it comes on and it changes, and the next guy steps up very rapidly, right? So now I'm not blocking to the left, I'm blocking to the right, right? And it's very hard to sort of turn those things off down to down if those switches are, one series on, one series off, or maybe even just a few plays, like package plays down in the red zone, right? You have to sort of rejigger your brain and go, okay, this guy likes the other thing. All right, I can't react like I have been for the rest of the game. And that's a difficult thing to do, even for very skilled players. So you have to have something. There has to be a wild card coming in with that talent that sort of outstrips those negatives. And with Jalen Milroe right now, it's his ability to run. And he is still a dual threat. And if you're not asking him to do, complicated stuff in passing, like, you've got a rollout, right? If it's there, throw it. If it's not, you're on your own, run it. That's not a complicated play. You can run that play with peewee players, right?
Mm-hmm.
And teams do, right? But you're adding the dynamism of Jalen Milroe and his ability to just strike from just about anywhere with his legs. And he is very well built. He is fast. And if he can make that, if he can bring you that angle that Darnold's not going to bring, is it worth it? Sure, they're going to see if it is. I think that probably is in those situations. If you're going to ask Jalen Milroe to come in, do a 5-step drop, process, go through 4 receivers in the face of a rush, like, I'm not sure that you're gaining enough advantage over, Sam in that particular scenario to do it, right? And it's going to be more disruptive than it is advantageous. Now, if they're doing it for a development perspective, get him in, get those reps, get him up to speed, because every rookie has to go through that. Every rookie has to kind of come in and take their lumps and have defensive coordinators throw nasty shifts at them and get reps under their belt. If they're thinking they're just going to tick those off, a little bit earlier in the first year so they can have a cleaner look at them in the second year, I would say don't get your hopes up for those reps, because they are just that. They are, rookies getting their legs under them. If they're bringing them in for a specific advantage, say in the red zone, which I could see, I'm a little more hopeful for those snaps. And mentally, it's also important for a rookie's development, right? If he comes in and gets thumped for 5 straight plays and then goes back to the bench, and that's, rinse, lather, repeat, that's not great, right? That's not going to help his confidence very much. If he comes in for a couple plays and scores a touchdown and everybody's cheering, sure, great. He's not, again, he's still going to have to, all rookies at some point have to come out and sort of bear the load. Okay, this drive is yours, right? You are responsible for moving this team down the field and dealing with things like false starts and whatever else that all quarterbacks have to deal with. That's a very different level of responsibility than being the closer off the bench, right? Hey, we need you to get this one guy out. Okay, well, that's very different than, hey, you got the whole game in front of you, figure it out. So it's a weird balance. And they're just going to have to, it's kind of like drafts. They're all individual. Quarterbacks are not the same. They're all going to respond a little bit differently to those opportunities. So we'll see how it really plays out. I do think he's going to get a lot of run in the preseason. They're probably going to give him as much run in the preseason as they can, because there's less consequence there and you can kind of get that speed out of the way. He's not going to see the complex defenses, but he is going to get some of that speed out of the way, and he can kind of get some of those early wins, hopefully build his confidence, because then my guess is, as long as Sam stays healthy, and maybe even if he doesn't, because he's not the most experienced backup, he's going to be on the bench and he's going to be working, Monday through Thursday in practice and really trying to hone his craft and get that consistency dialed in so that when he does get his chance on the field, he can shine, because I think it's in there. You just have to unlock it.
Gut instinct 3 years from now, are we talking about him as a top 10 quarterback?
If the passing comes together, yes.
No, you got to give me your gut instinct, brother. I need your gut instinct.
That is my gut instinct. If his passing comes together, he'll be out there. If it doesn't, we won't be talking at all about him in 3 years.
Okay, your gut instinct, does your gut instinct believe his passing will come together?
I hope so. He's smart enough to do it, and he's committed. In terms of getting somebody that's committed to the process, and this is a difficult process. Moving from college to the pros is a difficult process, even for top prospects. A lot of them don't talk about it. A lot of them say, no problem, I got it. But inside, they're all quaking a little bit. These are grown-ass men who are trying to pound you into the turf. It's a different level. And there's no more like, oh, well, you were drafted in the second round, or, oh, hey, you got 40 grand in NIL. We're going to play you. No, if you go out and stink the joint up, the guy behind you's taking your job. That's the NFL. And everybody has that, like, I'm pretty sure I can do it, but you have to go out and demonstrate that you can do it. You have to be mentally tough to do that. You have to be resilient, and you have to be willing, right? You can't come in and think you're God's gift to the game and I don't have to work at it. Like, nobody, I don't care what your talent is. We've seen so many highly talented players hit the NFL and go, yeah, I got it, and stop working. And they're out of the league in 3-4 years. Like, they're on their fourth team in 5 years because they couldn't get it done. Right. So Milroe seems like, from all reports, again, I have not talked to him directly, but I know a lot of people who have, and they come away very impressed with his ability to bear down, illustrate his own weaknesses, work on those, be committed, be humble, and just put in the work. Like, and that's what he's going to need. Now, coin flip as to whether that comes out, because, how many top 10 passers are there on the planet? There's probably about 30. And about 12 of them play in the NFL currently, and the rest of them used to. Like, it's a very difficult skill set to weld together. We all know that. But can he do it? Yeah, it's in there. We've seen it. Like, it's demonstrated. He has to do it consistently at a higher level of competition, because they're going to be throwing more stuff at him than they did at Alabama. The athletes are going to be very similar, but the schemes get much more complicated, and it comes at you a lot faster in the NFL.
That's for sure. Processing is a lot more leaned upon than it does at the college level in a major way.
You know what one very important caveat is on that? You know what I want them to do with him so badly? So Jaden Daniels, one of the things that he credits with his jump from both his 2 years is the VR training, right? Get him 10,000 reps in a VR headset. Right. And the cool thing about the VR training is you can crank it up so it goes 10% faster than the NFL does in real time. So it's like putting a weight on your bat, and you can knock that off. And then you get out there and you're like, hey, this isn't even as fast as VR, but you've been making, your brain and your eyes have been making the decisions at a faster rate. And then you come out of it and you're like, oh, okay, I've seen this. I've seen that shift. We've done that 100 times. I've drilled that. Muscle memory starts to kick in. And if they can do that and he takes to it, I would crank those chances up.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because it was a real light bulb moment for me too, in understanding what Jaden Daniels, and kind of putting 2 to 2 together, why things look so seamless for him on the field in a rookie year. And the processing is there, and he's seeing things. I'd have like a Black Mirror episode in my building. I'd basically bring my guy in and put the headset on him 24/7 and just have him just repping out. And it'd be like slowly turning up the speed every day, 1% or something. I'm with you 100%. Like, that is, to me, such a great tool to be able to utilize for these quarterbacks, to give them reps you couldn't get otherwise. And why not just hammer, especially seeing that success story in the major way. And I think it's a huge part. Remember what Jaden was with Arizona, right? And the difference of player he looked like from there to going to LSU. And you go, wow, yes, development happens, but that was a pretty monumental leap,
Yeah, I wonder, this is one of those questions I wonder about late at night. Like, what if that technology had been around for Jalen Hurts? Because Jalen Hurts is a very similar player mentally. And he's also a very similar player in his progression, in that when he was younger, he was a stronger rusher. He's always been an incredibly strong player and a great rusher, but he had that, freshman run at Alabama, and everybody said, oh, that's who he is. But he progressed throughout his career, but it was very measured, right? He got better every year, and it was very consistent, but it was a sort of a nice, even, slow rise up through his time at Oklahoma. And then even early in the league, like, he came in at a certain level and he has continued to progress, but it's been this, sort of even, slow progression. And then you see Jaden Daniels, and like you said, he's at Arizona 1 year, he's at LSU the next year, he's at LSU the year before he gets drafted, and then he comes and leads a moribund Commanders team to the playoffs and almost wins it. And you're like, okay, that's not level, that's fast. So I wonder if you'd applied that in historical situations when it wasn't really available, like, what could that guy have done? Like, how fast could we have seen that instead of this slow, steady, progressive rise?
There's no way to speed up on a practice field like that too. You can't do that even on a practice field. So one more question about this draft class, because I'm a little concerned. I love my man
Okay.
Byron Murphy, okay? I love me
Okay.
my Byron Murphy, but my Byron Murphy, he was stuck in purgatory last year. He was stuck in nose tackle purgatory.
Yes.
And I see Riley Mills taken in, and I look at the team and I go, Jaron Reed's not playing much nose anymore. Is Byron Murphy going to be stuck at nose tackle here for the foreseeable future?
I don't know. I hope not. I'm like you. I think he's more dynamic when he is dynamic, when he's moving around, when he's not always in the same position. I don't care if he's at nose 20%. I don't care if he's at nose 30%. That's fine. Like he can be there and he can win. But if it tips over 50% for him, I really feel like it's limiting what you can get out of him because there's a lot of players, even players in this draft, who rushed very well from one spot. And if you put them in another spot, they did not rush very well. And their college teams put them in the spot they did not rush very well more often. And that's just a thing. Like there are multiple players from multiple drafts like that. But we look at Byron Murphy, we look at his skill set, and, I don't have the numbers on nose tackle versus 3-tech or wider. But I could look them up and I bet they get better 3-tech or wider, right? 3-tech, 4-eye, even 5 when they rotate him out there. He's got skills to win against tackles, like because he's so quick. And I want to see him do that more often. Like that's the player that I think you drafted way up high is the pass rushing threat. We talked about this a lot during the live stream. If you're a very, very solid, great run stopping defensive tackle and you have no pass rush, typically you're going after the 3rd round. You're going in the 4th or the 5th because that's where teams know they can get you. If you're that same player and you just sprinkle in the threat of some pass rush, oh, this guy might get, 15, 20, 30 pressures a year. He might get 4, 5, 6, 7 sacks, which is a lot in the NFL from that position. You're going in the end of the 1st round, middle of the 2nd, like pass rush from interior defensive spots is seriously like pixie dust. Like NFL teams love that stuff. And Byron Murphy has a lot of that, as much as we've seen from any defensive tackle in the last 2 or 3 years. Like make sure he can use it as much as possible. So I get where you're going. And I was wondering if one of their later picks was going to be one of those hulking defensive tackles, like a Cam Jackson from Florida, or even Cam Horsley from Boston College is a guy like that. Like bring it as snap eater who is just going to dominate 2 gaps and be a block of granite in the middle of your line and turn Byron Murphy loose. They didn't do that. And Riley Mills is not that either. Like he's also a pass rushing interior defensive tackle. He is not great against the run. And he's not going to play a ton this year anyways, because of the timing of his injury. But even if he had been, he's not that guy. Like that's not why they brought him in. They brought him in for his ability to penetrate from the interior spots, which is, in my mind, a backup to Byron Murphy, because he's certainly not going to supplant him. He's not a superior player.
Yeah, but you got Leonard Williams, and you re-signed Jaron Reed to a 3-year contract extension this offseason, and you see like you're 4 3-techs deep by basically right now as it stands. I didn't kick some Leonard to the outside like they did last year a little bit, but I'm hoping, hey, I'd rather have Murphy out on the edge than 1-tech. I mean, and run some loops and twists off that and go have some fun like the Rams did with their defensive line. I mean, like the Rams wanted Murphy. You see what they did with Fisk in the first year with his run deficiencies, but yet maximizing what he does as a pass rusher. And you go, you'd put Byron Murphy in that defense. Does he have 13 sacks last year? Does he have 4? I mean, if Fisk can get to 10, I think Murphy's a pretty superior player as far as in what he's able to do. So this made me wonder on that one a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they're going to do down the road there. It'll be interesting. But again, those players do come available. If you're going to go get one, go get the pass rushing one, and then sign the run stopping DT later in free agency, second wave. There's even cast-offs at the end of, roster cut downs. Those guys are available because they're expendable. Oh shoot, the Steelers just caught one. One of my favorites played at Auburn. Anyways, they just dropped him, and they dropped him like the day after the draft because again, they went out and got Derek Harmon, and they're filling in those spots. Oh, Montravius Adams. Adams played at Auburn. He's been a run stuffing DT in the league, and again, those guys are available. Like Montravius Adams is on the street right now. You sign him to the rotation to just eat those run stuffing snaps. Great, I'm totally cool with it.
Yeah, I think they will find something, but we are just kind of sitting right. We have an undrafted rookie free agent, so it's kind of like I think we just had Hankins back, but Hankins was kind of done last year at 33. He didn't have a lot left in the tank. A little bit of a change of direction and questioning here on something I know I talked to you about or put in the notes here for the show, but I'm very interested to get your response on this because your Chicago Bears and Seahawks kind of approached their offensive line in similar states walking into this offseason, being that there was a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
And your Bears came in and snaked us for Dahlman. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
We did not really do anything in free agency unless you're a big believer in Josh Jones is finally ready to pop. And so your Bears on the other side of this really decided, no, we're going to invest in this offensive line free agency, make a trade for a Jonah Jackson. We're going to get this taken care of kind of prior to the draft. Do you have a preference about which direction those two teams went with this, and it's which one's going to have success, or do you think they both will have success in the directions they're taking here, be it that they are differently?
Yeah, they did approach it differently, but I think both of them did work that they needed to do. And I'm always going to sort of get in the corner of a team that says, yes, we have a deficiency and we're going to attack it in multiple ways. They both did. I like Chicago's approach a little bit better because of who they ended up with, right? I really like Jonah Jackson. I know he had a down year in LA, injured, but he was one of my favorite young guards in the league when he was drafted and through his time in Detroit. And then Joe Thuney was a complete surprise. I have to give it to Ryan Poles. This is a great move by Ryan Poles because everybody was saying Trey Smith. And we all thought, oh, there's a possibility that Trey Smith won't make it. As soon as they signed Trey Smith to the deal, Ryan Poles, who used to work in that organization, went, look, you can't pay all three. You're already paying Creed big money. Now you've chosen, right? You've chosen to pay Trey Smith big money. You can't re-up Thuney for big money. What's it going to cost to get him? Calls his buddies like immediately after that happens, makes a trade for that, gets a very solid player at a huge need for Chicago. And then it was really a crux move on Dahlman. And everybody knew at the combine, everybody I asked was like, yep, it's going to happen. Unless something terrible happens, that's happening early. And I was like, okay, great. And then you come away from, like you said, pre-free agency and free agency heading into the draft with 2 new guards and a new center, which you desperately needed. It's pretty rare that you need to replace 3/5 of your offensive line, but the Bears needed to do it badly. And they do that. And then they can add on to it with guys like Ozzie Trapillo in the draft and really get to that 8 or 9 that Ben Johnson talked about at the combine when somebody said, it's not your best 5. You can't go into an NFL season with your best 5. It's your best 8 or 9 because guys will get injured. You're going to have to move them around. So the Seahawks, again, do it a little bit differently. My question with the Seahawks is, did you do enough at tackle? I know you drafted a tackle way down the board, but you're not playing Gray Zable at tackle. And if Abe Lucas's knees are not good to go, again, only they're going to know that, not us, then you're starting off behind the sticks, right? If Gray Zable comes in and he's your center, they've got him, currently penciled in at guard. I like Olu as a center. I think he's fine, but I think Gray Zable's a better center. And then I really do think that Bryce Cabaldo and Christian Haynes are going to be fighting it out for that either top swing or starting, they're still preaching competition. So again, do you have 6 guys that you can play? Tackle's a bit of a question mark, but you did make, in my mind, improvements to this line, which was necessary. Did you do enough? I don't know. We'll see. Tackles are really hard to get. Again, you look at what all the tackles for, even very mediocre tackles signed for in free agency. It's wildly expensive to go after in free agency. You have to draft, and there wasn't a great supply. I mean, Bears ended up drafting Trapillo pretty high, and he was, 6th or 7th tackle. So if you're going to do it, it would have been no Gray Zable in drafting a tackle. Again, I don't know. With how sure are you about Abe's knees? We'll see. But hopefully, again, another year removed from that injury, he's better and ready to go because he's a great player when he's ready to go. But it's thin ice. They both did a bunch of work. I think Chicago did more, and Chicago, quite frankly, needed to do more because their offensive line was in shambles. They had 2 young tackles who they really liked and kind of nothing else, despite throwing money at it in free agency and drafting and whatever. None of it had worked. So they really did need to put their foot in the ground and say, no, we're going to fix this. Because if we don't, Caleb's going to get wasted. And Caleb's the most important thing.
I loved your Bears approach, quite honestly. I feel like you need to do this because your quarterback's there and you need to protect him. This was a necessity. And I just thought your guys' approach was tactful and had strategy behind it. You could understand why they were doing what they were doing. And I just were with us on 2. We don't have the left. Chris Haynes isn't really a left guard. He's a right guard, kind of pure, really, in how he rolls. And then if that means Bryce Calladay then has to come in and kind of play day one left guard, because then if Zable goes into center, that's where he'll be. And we don't have another left guard on the roster a little bit. But you don't feel like this year with maybe the new coaching we've had brought in, Kubiak and his crew coming in, I'm not going to be looking into like a league worst crew again this year in both pass protection and run blockers.
No, I don't believe so. Like I really don't believe so. And some of that was, again, getting up to speed for the coordinator last year. And it took half season. So the first half was really not that great. They never really did establish a run. They got better at it. But in terms of league worsts, I very much doubt it. You have a very experienced coordinator. You have more pieces. Is it going to be best? No, but it doesn't have to be best. Like, you can win in the NFL without a top 10 offensive line. Sure helps. Like, if you're the Eagles, great. But not everybody's Eagles, and not everybody can be. Not everybody has Jeff Stoutland. That's, a huge competitive advantage for them. But you can win in the NFL. We've seen the Chiefs do it with, subpar offensive lines, injured offensive lines. They keep getting there. You can do it with a 15th or 16th best. You can't do it with a 25th best, right? That's just too much pressure. If you're down to 25 or 30, 32, like, no, your offense has no chance. It's never going to launch. But as long as you're okay at the offensive line, and I think the Seahawks, between the changing coordinators and the additions that they've made, quite frankly, have a chance to be okay. And that's okay. That's enough.
Middle of the road would be a huge improvement. And like you said,
Right.
you just can't get anywhere when it's not in that spot of it. And it's neither run or pass protection. So we didn't have kind of throw your hat on the run game, but the pass protection sucks, or you're pass protecting like monsters, but you can't, go the run. You're getting penetration in the run games. And Brett, I think, had a stat last year. They were like 32nd and yards before our running backs are hit after they get the ball, compared to the Eagles, they're like 3 yards a carry. You're like, whoa, what a discrepancy, disparity, between those two. I've got to ask you about the big trade that was consummated. I mean, the young Jaguars GM got totally taken advantage of, but when the guy's 5 years old, we expect that. The one I want to speak to really here is the Rams trade in the first round with the Falcons, because I thought in a lot of ways almost the Rams sort of were able almost to win the draft at times without firing a shot, because it appears to me that they've gotten their pathway with a slip and slide to their next franchise quarterback, and potentially even Arch within that if he comes out next year. Talk me off the ledge with this one, or maybe you agree.
I think they did a great job. I mean, Snead McVay, like, this is good work. You take advantages when they're dropped in your lap, and they have a chance with a team trading up who really wants a player and believes in him. Again, they're like, okay, that surprises us, but we're not going to say no to you giving us your first round pick next year. And Les Snead's fascinating, from F them picks to give me them picks. And if you're smart, you do business in this way. You don't say, hey, I'm always going one way, because then you're limiting half your opportunities. Atlanta comes to them with an opportunity and they go, sure, in this draft we don't need to take somebody at this spot. We'll take your picks and next year's pick. And, because we're good and we're going and we think we're okay. And again, that's the ability to do that, is a sum total of all the moves of going out and getting Stafford years ago, of rebuilding that offensive line last year and really beefing it up, adding to the overall weight across. I think they average like 330 across the front now. It's crazy. And then stacking that defensive line talent. So you've got a really solid pass rush and can, maybe invest a little bit less in the secondary and still be on pace to perform defensively. If you're sitting in that position and somebody goes, hey, we're going to give you a first round pick, and you're not feeling like, hey, I really need that first round pick to protect my quarterback or get my quarterback, which wasn't the case in this draft as far down as the Rams were. Sure. Why not? They have the flexibility because they've built it.
Yeah. I just think with Atlanta though, too, they may move Cousins before the season gets to, we just don't know really where that thing's going to go. And then it becomes all on Michael Penix's health, and it starts to make me nervous with that. And even the edge rushers you get, which those are good edge rushers, but we know that with edge rushers, they tend to take a little bit of time to develop and get right. And so you go, well, I just can see how this comes out as kind of in the wash, where suddenly we're looking at them with a top 5 pick next year and we're going, whoa, how did they pull that one off? And it's like, just how could you do that? So you're in the camp with me on that, is kind of, or maybe not. Or do you feel like kind of silly from Atlanta's perspective, making that kind of move?
Atlanta has been pushing pretty hard. They pushed hard last year with the Penix trade, and the reason they did it was because of Kirk Cousins' health, right? They weren't as sure. We're talking about medicals. Medical seems to be the theme of the podcast, but they were sure, or they thought they were sure that Cousins was going to be able to play. And when he signed, their team doctor took one look at him and said, "Nah, he's not starting the season." And they were like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "No, I'm not signing off on him starting the season." Now he did, but he couldn't move. And so 50% of their offense went out the window, and the league figured that out really quickly. And that's why the run game sucked, was because you could only run certain things and the angles were coming from certain ways. It had to be from pistol because he couldn't reach on a 3 or 5 step drop. Like he literally couldn't reach the running back. So everybody was like, well, we know where it's coming from. And if you're lining up to take a punch and you know where it's coming from, you got a lot better chance of dodging it or countering it. And so the league just crushed him because Cousins couldn't move, but they took Penix because they were like, we might not have a quarterback. And it does set them up, right? Penix is now their anointed starter. And I think that's a good move for them. But they sort of tried to do it again this year. They needed pass rush, and instead of letting the board fall to them or again, working free agency or maybe, reaching out to the Giants and saying, hey, is Kayvon Thibodeau available? Now, sounds like they're going to pick up his 5th year, but like there are those options around the league. Instead of doing that, they're like, hey, we're going to throw next year's first round pick at a guy that's falling that we had a good grade on, and James Pierce. Okay, they're trying to load a pass rush. Everybody knows they needed pass rush, and they thought, hey, despite that, here's a guy slipping down into the first round. If James Pierce hits and they get fifth year control on an edge rusher, that's incredibly valuable. So that's the flip side of this coin, is if they're crazy like a fox, it works great. If not, everybody's going to look back, like you said, and say, oh, you just handed a very high pick to the Rams. You didn't get any success out of it. You don't have a first round pick to try and dig yourself out next year. Now you've basically dug yourself a hole. So it's a bet, and it's a big bet, and they pushed a lot of chips in on it. If it hits, just like any other move in the NFL, if it hits, they look great. If it doesn't, they're going to be behind the 8 ball and looking at, not necessarily tearing things down, but tearing some of it down.
And I can see long-term being much more of a better move for them than maybe this initial year, if that makes sense on it as well. And it's funny you talk about that, those outside zone runs for those 37-year-old quarterbacks. I remember watching Stafford this year in the early part of the game, getting out to an outside zone, and they had a close-up of his face. And it was like chariots of fire in my mind watching, and it's like his face is straining. And he's stretching the ball out,
It's a hard thing to do.
Oh, his feet are just, and you're laughing your ass off because it's you're looking back at the coach like, you're going to call that again? Can we get some A-gap runs, please? Just give me some power here.
Yeah, right.
It is
the short handoffs. I like the short handoffs.
Let me maybe out a shotgun with some RPO stuff, but I'm not going to keep it. Well, a couple donations here, and we'll finish up with you on this. Thank you for hanging with me here today. And I didn't get a chance to say this earlier, AJ, but if you guys are watching today, if you guys can do me a favor, for all guests that come here to the channel, of course, we show them the love because they're kind enough to take time away. He's been running ragged here through the draft process. Down in the description section below, you'll see a link to Bootleg Football, their podcast here on YouTube, their channel here on YouTube. Please do go over there and sub up to them. They got a great channel. They are doing coverage throughout the year. You're going to want to see when they come back and they're looking at the Seahawks perspective show that they'll be doing, is they'll be filming that, I know, back in July to get that prepared. You're going to want to catch that. So please do get subbed up to EJ Snyder. The link is right there. Just click it, get subbed on up, show them the love for taking the time to come out over here. As EJ, I really do appreciate you doing this, knowing how busy you are, and love what you have to offer here as far as your insights on these on this draft process and team.
Yeah, no, it's fun to do, and it's nice to get to share a little bit after the draft too, because we work so hard to figure out who all these players are and where they might go, and say all that stuff before the draft happens, and the draft happens, and there's this big drop off. So it's nice to be able to kind of get a second use out of some of that information.
It really is. And it's a ton of value. I know I can speak to the people who are going to comment on this video and talk to me about it. I much love having you on and your insights on it. You don't have a dog in the fight, which is also a very important part of this at times too, with making sure we're getting really just, level field evaluation as to what's happening. Feed me more Seahawks. Thank you for the $2 donation. Says Justin Fields was last man in, first guy off, different evaluation. Yeah, I think that, even though I'm not a big Milrow guy, I think that the work ethic stuff, I don't think we had any of those questions coming out with Milrow that were kind of a little there with Fields. That's one of the things I heard about Fields coming out. I don't know if they were fair or not, but that's just what you were hearing.
Yeah, you did hear it, and it was very unfair. It was planted very purposely by some people that had an anti-Fields agenda, and that was not really his issue. He's incredibly smart, and he worked really hard. But like Milroe and every other quarterback that comes to the NFL, he had deficiencies that he had to work on, and those were the ones we highlighted pre-draft. He has to process more quickly. He's got to play within structure with a little bit more verve, right? Sometimes he can look almost nonchalant because of that athletic ability, and he hasn't been able to pay that off. Now, you can say he didn't get supported in his first year in Chicago. That's 100% true. They threw him in the very first game he ever went into with no game plan. He'd taken no first team snaps, which was, again, a terrible strategy for developing a young quarterback, and he got absolutely blasted. You want to talk about that mental side of being a quarterback? He did like 9 sacks against Cleveland in his first game ever. He got the hell beat out of him. Like, that is your welcome to the NFL moment. Like, dude, we didn't help you at all. We didn't game plan for you. We didn't even prepare. We just said, go do it, Rook, which was a terrible mistake. But on Fields' side, he has his responsibility too. And he is largely the same player he was at Ohio State, which was a very good player, but not a great pro player. And again, the projection was, yes, he has all these skills. He is a tremendous running threat. He's got a tremendous arm. You saw that at OSU, but he's got to see it more quickly. He's got to build his anticipation. He's got to play within structure with a little more urgency. And, he's got to get a better handle on complex defenses, right? And you could go down that list and say his time to throw is still really high. When he has to go deep into progressions, it doesn't look great. He's not getting the ball out a ton faster than he did when he got into the league. So he hasn't really developed. Now, is that because he's not working or putting in the mental side? I don't know. Like, I don't think so. Everything I heard about him when he was in Chicago was he was putting in the work, but there's watching film and knowing what you're watching. There's studying and being able to put it, on grass on Sunday with 300-pound guys chasing you, trying to take your head off, and not everybody can do it. And he hasn't really functionally progressed a ton, a little bit, but not near as much as we all hoped he would. I certainly hoped he would, to really maximize all that talent. He still has a lot of the same holes in his game that we saw at OSU that we thought he'd be able to overcome or hoped he'd be able to overcome, and he hasn't. So
it's one of the reasons I say with my quarterbacks, I look at 2 things as the forefront: arm strength, but then the processing, how you see the field thing. Because I think it can come along a little bit, but I think that it's one of those things that gets looked at as this thing that can be just mightily improved when you get to the NFL, rather than you kind of got it or you don't. And we have a lot of skills that we look at that you got it or you don't, and come a little bit further, but it is or it isn't there. And I could be wrong on this one, but it just starts to feel like, as I've grown with time looking at quarterbacks, that part is one that you do have or you don't have. Back to your point of maybe this isn't a work ethic thing on that a bit with them on it, where it is just, hey, it's actual thing. It's an ability, like being fast or having a big arm. It's harder to quantify, but nonetheless, kind of that way. You buying in that a little bit, or are you?
Yeah, I don't disagree. It's funny because there's a couple things that, you talked about arm strength, and arm strength can be improved, right? And guys like Drew Brees came in and his arm was not particularly strong coming out of Purdue. And his arm strength increased over the first 3 years he was in the league quite a bit. You could see it, and you've seen it with other guys as well. So, you're never going to turn a noodle arm into a rocket arm, but you can turn an average arm into a decent NFL arm. Accuracy was always the one that I felt like was really hard to improve. And Mike Leach, late great Mike Leach, said the same thing. Like, accuracy is you put a bunch of 12-year-olds out in front of a road sign with snowballs, and the guy that hits it is the guy that can throw it, right? That's just it's an innate thing. And we've felt that way about accuracy for a long time, until very recently when Josh Allen redid his mechanics and his accuracy jumped, and Lamar did the same thing. The knock on Lamar was, hey, he can be scattershot. He is very accurate at times, but it's not all the time. Sound familiar? And he too reworked it and became an incredibly accurate quarterback. So now people are kind of starting to, again, those are 2 mutant level athletes. Let's be, 100% clear about that. But they both have managed to increase a thing that typically NFL evaluators thought really couldn't be that much increased. Like, if you came in as a poor accuracy thrower, you were going to just have to deal with that. So it's interesting to see these things kind of get knocked off. But processing is one where I kind of go back to that, like, give the guy VR reps. And if the guy VR reps, if they don't take, then he can't. And I like the idea that you're categorizing it as an ability, harder to quantify, but an ability. Like, this guy's got great processing. I've maintained for years that, like, if Kellen Moore could have had an arm strong enough, he would have been a great NFL quarterback, because he was tremendous at pre-snap processing in college. You could see it, but his arm just wasn't enough to force the ball into those down the field windows in the NFL that close really quickly. But that's the reason he's a great coach. He sees it. He sees it and always has really quickly. And that's a great ability, but you got to combine it with the others. So, I think, again, like all abilities, some guys can get a little bit faster, right? You see guys that didn't have long speed coming into the league. They go work with a speed trainer, right? Nobody ever taught them how to run. They weren't track athletes or whatever else. And they gain, maybe a 10th. Well, a 10th in the NFL is a lot. So it's cool to see athletes kind of nibbling away at the edge, but not everybody can. Like, there are going to be some guys with processing that come in, you give them all the VR reps in the world, and it's just not going to stick.
We make some good points, though, in that we are moving into new areas of training methods, and maybe old methodologies that couldn't break through in some of those places. Now we're going to start to find a little bit of an ability to kind of catch with these guys. And, we can't improve this one thing that used to just be stagnant and really couldn't work. It only just mildly come forward. PGZ, thank you for the $2 donation. Says B loves Milrow. He just won't admit it yet. I'm trying, man. I'm trying on the Milrow thing. I really am. Yeah, it's a tough one for me. It's going to take some time on this one. So, But thank you, PGZ. Martin Lawrence, thank you for the $5 donation. It says, I've seen a lot of people rank the Seahawks draft as an A or an A+. I have it as a B+. Am I being too harsh, EJ?
Oh, I don't think it's harsh. I think draft grades are, again, what's your criteria, right? Did they have a lot of picks and they used them great, or it was just they threw a lot of options at the wall? I mean, there's the scattershot approach too. Some teams do that, right? Or did they have only 3 picks, but they were all super high quality? Or, are their picks scheduled to hit right away, and other teams are betting on potential? Like, a lot of Phillies picks you could look at and say, look, 2 years from now, that's going to be vicious, because they have the luxury to do that. They're the world champs and they have a great roster. They didn't have to gut it. So it depends on what your criteria is for a draft. Is it immediate impact? Is it just filling holes? Is it filling future needs? Is it insulating yourself from having to spend big money that you don't have? Like, there's a million different ways to grade it. So, if you think it's a tier below for one of those reasons, B+ is still really good. It's better than I did in my first couple of years of college. So I'll take it. If you gave me a B+, I'd be thrilled. And again, these are very subjective as to, I don't mind anybody giving any grade. I want to hear their reasoning. And then if I agree with that, that's fine. Like, if somebody comes out and says the Seahawks are an F, I want to sit down and have a conversation with that person. Like, why? Yeah. What do you think they missed on that's so egregious that you failed them, when I see something very, very different? And I think those are good conversations to have. Now, we might agree to disagree. I might say, hey, I don't think your reasons are valid. Right. And it might come down to, like, hey, you didn't draft the quarterback I wanted, so I'm going to fail you. Okay, fine. Like, if that's your criteria, cool. Like, everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I might not agree with it, but you could have it. That's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm the same way on it. And I officially had this one as a B. I have a little bit of worry for my spent. I know I've kept you a little long here, but just a little worried that you had the 5 picks in the top 100. And I'm worried that 3 years down the line, we might look at those 5 picks in the equivalency. And I think Amori's talent's through the roof. I think everything you said is absolutely on point with it. I think what you said without Zable is absolutely on point with it. But I do have a little worry that, not say I think it's going to happen this way. This is my worry from this draft for the Hawks, is that you look at it 3 years from now and you say, of those 5 picks you had in the top 100, you came out of it with a really solid center and a really solid safety. And that's just the one little worry I have as much as anything on this draft. But I hope I'm wrong with it. I hope these guys just light the world on fire and become all pros. I do. Absolutely.
Sure. And none of us know is the great thing. One of the things I've learned in 10, 12 years in this business is, saying absolutes are garbage in the draft.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this guy's absolutely going to be great, or this guy's absolutely going to bust. You're going to be wrong on both of those. So always have in the back of your mind, how could this fail? Right? Like you said, look at the Seahawks draft, and what's the worst case? Right? Is that maybe only Zable hits, right? Maybe somebody else gets injured and the other guys just don't pan out. Like, what could that look like, right? What's the likelihood of that? Is it, very likely? I don't think it's very likely. Is it possible? It's 100% possible. Don't ever say it's impossible, because it'll come right back and bite you in the butt. And same thing on the flip side. When you're saying, hey, this is the ceiling for all these guys. How likely is it that everybody hits their ceiling? It's not very likely. So if you had to pick 3 of them, is that enough? Right? If they hit their ceiling, you always have to kind of have that in the back of your mind, because that's how it works out in real life. Not everybody dials into the maximum, right?
100%. 100%. And it is arbitrary. Every person's got their own individual kind of grading system on it. Last question, I promise you on this one, but I did want to, I know you've looked at this guy, and I just want to ask you, is the one UDFA that we had a couple of UDFAs I really liked, but there was one particular,
I'd say 3.
Yeah, there was a couple. I don't want to go too down the long lane with you, but there was one that I really liked that I thought was kind of like undersold in this draft, and that's Jared Ivey.
Yeah.
I feel like Ivey is a guy that can play in this league. I know the testing times were what they were, but they used him all over that line. I watch him win on tape. He wins.
Yeah. He's a great player. I was very surprised that he didn't get drafted for one. I still haven't heard why that was. Sometimes we hear, sometimes we don't. There are a bunch of guys that were falling in this draft. I reached out and I got answers on, I don't know, somewhere between a third and a half of them. They're like, oh, this is a character thing, or that was a medical thing, or you didn't hear about this thing, or whatever. And you're like, okay. And then other guys, they're like, nope, I didn't hear anything, like at all. I didn't hear anything good. I didn't hear anything bad. I just didn't hear anything. So I don't know why that guy didn't fall. Cause I too had in the case of Ivey, he would have been a priority 4th rounder for me. If he didn't slip into the compensatory picks in the 3rd round, which I think he has the talent to do, or, he would have been a first off the board on day 3 eligible type of player for me, because even on that very talented Ole Miss line with 2 other guys that got drafted ahead of him, Walter Nolan and Princely, he still made plays. He is a very tall guy. He's got a great long arm. He is more of a power player, can crush the pocket. I thought, again, that his testing numbers didn't really jive with what I saw on tape. I thought he was better than that on tape. It's not going to be a world beater with long speed ever, but that's not his game. And he's very effective with the game that he has at the highest level of competition in college football. I don't know why he didn't get drafted. He is also a guy that had multiple offers. You could tell because he didn't sign with a team like 2 hours after the draft. He took his time. It was almost a full day. The Hawks are lucky to land him. It is very much like getting another draft pick for whatever reason he fell. And yeah, I think Mike Mack has every idea of what he's going to do with that guy in his defense in terms of role and strengths.
Gets me so excited, man, because I had him at the top of the 4th round as well on my big board. I really liked him. And then the power edge part you talk about, that's what we need on this team. Mafe, not really power edge, good against the run. Derek Hall's struggled against the run and has not been as much of an edge setter. You hope DeMarcus Lawrence can do some of that for you in the defense, but Uchenna doesn't have as much of that. And he's a good run defender as well, but just not that power edge setter, where they set him out from the wide 9, and it's almost like a wide 10. McDonald will put him out that extra step and then just say, run as hard as you can as a big guy at that tackle and just blow up the backfield, just mess the whole play up, and everybody will operate around you. And Ivey seems to have at least a little bit of that ability.
For sure.
Well, I want to thank you today, EJ, for rocking with me here for an hour, and you've been on this channel multiple times over before. So thank you for taking the time out. I know you've got to be exhausted running through the end of this draft coverage as you guys cover this as closely as anybody in this game. I am getting out to the Senior Bowl next year if you're out there. So hopefully I can see you out there if you are out there at that time. So definitely plan in place and doing that. Folks, do me this favor if you could. Down in the description link section below, EJ's taking a time, hour out of his time, been here multiple times before. We're going to have him on again. But do go to his channel, Bootleg Football there. The link's right down in the description section, and sub on up to his channel. Show him the love for showing us the love today, coming in here and taking the time out as he does. I really do appreciate it, man. You guys are doing great work over there, EJ. Keep kicking ass and taking names, my man.
We'll do what we can. That's the plan, and that's been the plan for the last 5.5 years, and it seems like it's working out all right. So we're just going to keep our heads down and keep doing it as long as people keep paying attention to it.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Well, thank you guys for watching today. I really appreciate it. EJ, you have yourself a great day. Get some time off and rest, maybe a little bit outside in some sunshine, maybe outside of a pool, just kick back, a little nice frothy drink, get that in and recharge. And we'll have you back on here again soon. Maybe before the season, we can pull you back on in here.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for the time, Brandon.
Thank you, EJ. You guys have a great night. Appreciate you guys watching. We'll be back soon. But thank you.